Hello everyone and welcome to a preview of Rutgers football for 2024. So I'm going to go ahead and do all the Big Ten teams, maybe continue on if I find the time to do it. But yeah, I definitely do all the Big Ten teams. But we'll start here with this video. We're going to do Rutgers. So obviously Rutgers comes off a season where they finished 7-6, ended up having some pretty decent wins last year, and ended it with a win against Miami, Florida in the Pinstripe Bowl. The Scarlet Knights are coached by Greg Schiano. This is in his 2 stints as head coach for Rutgers. He is 87-95. And Rutgers is, again, coming off a pretty decent year for them. Their best since their first year in the Big Ten, where they finished 8-5. So obviously they're getting some momentum going, and this has, a chance for them to continue that momentum. And yeah, but let's go ahead now and look at the starting, kind of their projected kind of starters and their stats. So, a quarterback, Minnesota transfer, Athene Kalamas is their projected starter. Last year in Minnesota, he had a completion percentage of 53.1. He threw for 1,838 yards, 14 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. I do remember the big thing about this guy is that he would start out the game really, really strong. Like, I even remember this as a Purdue fan. I remember them playing. I remember doing my preview of Minnesota-Purdue, and I remember that was a thing where I noticed that in the first half he'd play well, and then the second half he'd kind of drop off. And I remember watching that game as the Purdue game. That definitely played to how it went. They came out in the first half playing really well. In the second half, he could hardly hit the broadside of a barn. So obviously, one of his big things this year is going to be improving in the second half of football games, because obviously that's where games are won and lost. But anyway, a running back, Kyle Managi and Sam Brown are their top 2 running backs. Managi last season had 242 carries for 1,262 yards and 8 touchdowns. Meanwhile, Sam Brown had 63 carries for 216 yards and 2 touchdowns. At wide receiver, their top 3 guys are Demir Miller, Christian Dremel Jr., and Nassim Brantley. Miller is a transfer from Monmouth, who actually led the FCS in receiving yards last year. He had 90 receptions for 1,295 yards and for 9 touchdowns. So obviously this guy could put up stats at the FCS level, so it'll be interesting to see if they can kind of translate that over to the FBS level. Christian Dremel last year, he had 36 receptions for 468 yards and 3 touchdowns. And finally, Nassim Brantley really didn't play too much last year, but in 2022 he had 53 receptions for 903 yards and 9 touchdowns. The top tight end for the Scarlet Knights is Kenny Fletcher. He moves from D-line to tight end, so he doesn't have any real stats at tight end, so it'll be interesting to see how he kind of does in that role. But anyway, offensively, Rutgers is projected to score about 29.1 points per game. That's according to the Phil Steele College Football Preview magazine. That's where I'll be using my projections, not only for how much, points they might score, but also kind of projected how that's where I'm getting the projected starting lineups for and things like that. And on defense, the Scarlet Knights are projected to give up about 23 points per game. So obviously, this team will be, pretty decent. Again, I think that's, having a plus 6 point differential means that you should be, close to getting to a bowl game. But anyway, now let's take a look at the schedule for the Scarlet Knights, as all my notes now fall to the floor. That's great. So let me pick those up real quick. Very professional around it. Oh, you know what? This is YouTube. We're going to have fun. I'm just, doing this to have fun. Obviously, I'm trying my best to make it look nice and do things, but if stupid stuff like that happens, I'm leaving it in. It's funny. See that all, everything. If a paper avalanche happens. But either way, let's now look at the schedule for the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. So in the first game of the season, they are actually going to be playing the Howard Bison on Friday, August 29th at 6 p.m. This should be a good first starting game for them, obviously playing an FCS opponent. First week of the season does have its benefits. It's a game where you get to see another guy, a guy with another colored jersey on, but at the same point, it's not going to be, you're not coming out of the gate having to play a team that's going to be, going to be a great football team. It's going to be a decent football team. Obviously, some of the FCS schools can beat FBS schools, but it's not going to be like you're having to play Michigan right off the bat. But either way, moving on from that, then again on September 7th, they get to play Akron, who's another team that kind of, they've kind of had their problems the last couple of years. I mean, obviously, over the years, Akron's had some good football teams, but that hasn't been the case lately. Then they get to travel to Lane Stadium to play ACC opponent Virginia Tech. This should be a pretty good game for Rutgers. It'll be a good measuring stick game. Obviously, Virginia Tech's not been the greatest football team. I mean, they've been better last year, But having to play at Lane Stadium, that place is a rocking environment, and I'm sure Virginia Tech is wanting to finally get things turned around and get back to where they were a decade ago, competing for ACC championships. But then after that, they get to start Big Ten play on a short week against national runner-up Washington. So that should be a fun way to, go ahead. Not only do you have to play on the road in an ACC game, but then you get a short week against the defending national runner-up Washington. So that'll be a tough one for them. Then the Scarlet Knights hit the road and go to Corn Country as they play the Nebraska Cornhuskers on October 5th. Then they get to come home and play Wisconsin on October 12th, so that should be a good game. Another kind of game where Wisconsin should be good. I assume Wisconsin's finally going to be kind of back more to where they kind of expect their team, a top 25 team, so that should be an interesting game for Rutgers to kind of see where they're at, because obviously a lot of these games before they play, again, we don't know what Washington's going to do. And Virginia Tech is probably another game, so it'll be interesting to see them against a really tough opponent in Wisconsin. But on the 19th of November, they get a cross-country road trip to play UCLA. That should be an interesting one. But then they kind of got the short end of the stick here, and definitely emphasis on short, as they have to play on a short week against oh, wait a minute, I messed up when I said that. UCLA is at home. Then they have to go on the road on a short week visiting LA to go play USC. I had those two games in my head flipped. But yeah, that's going to be tough to have to go on the road on a short week, cross country. And for Rutgers, it's literally cross country. It's not like it's Nebraska where, yeah, it's half the United States. No, it's the full continental United States basically they're having to travel. So it'll be a tough one for them having to do that. But they do get a bye after that, which will be nice, and then they play Minnesota on November 9th. This is going to be a big one probably for both these two teams. As I mentioned, as I'll probably again mention in the Minnesota one, these two, for bowl contention with these two teams, that's where they're wanting to be. This will be a huge one for both of them. Then after that, they get to play Maryland on November 16th. It'll be interesting to see how Maryland kind of comes back. Obviously losing Tagovailoa, see how kind of their offense rebuilds. Again, I don't know. I'm not thinking they're going to be too great, but you never know. Obviously, college football is a weird thing. That's the reason the games happen, because who knows? On November 23rd, then they get to cap off their home schedule against the Illinois Fighting Illini. Then they conclude their regular season on November 30th in East Lansing as they play the Michigan State Spartans. This will be an interesting one too, because Michigan State's kind of an unknown. Obviously, they've had some down years, but Jonathan Smith coming in, he built up that Oregon State program, turned them into a top 10 football team for some points this year. So it'll be interesting to see what he can do at Michigan State. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Again, this is my first one, so there was some mistakes, and yeah, I guarantee you they'll continue to be. Those will continue to exist. But I hope to get better at these. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Bye.